when people hear Trump claim the trial is rigged and so forth, what I think is really important to remember is that the people who are deliberating right now, they are the ones who are going to decide, not the judge, whether or not former President Trump will be convicted of these felony counts or not. This is a jury of everyday Americans, everyday New Yorkers, who are going to listen very carefully to all the testimony, all the evidence, look at all the documents, think about the jury instructions that were given to them. And these everyday Americans are the ones who are going to be deciding Trump's fate. So when he says that it's rigged, it's really an attack on those Americans, which I think that, whether you support Donald Trump or not, most people have faith in our jury system. The founders of our country believed very deeply in the jury as a fundamental part of democracy. It's something we don't maybe think about that much anymore. People maybe will try to get out of jury service or whatever, but to the founders of the United States, it was an incredibly important bulwark of liberty. Those were words that they used to ensure that we had a country that was ruled by law, that no one was above the law, including, in this case, a former president, and that no matter how powerful or how vulnerable you were, your fate would always be left in the hands of your peers. And here, that's what is going on right now as this jury deliberates.
Well, Elizabeth, also the entire notion that a defendant is innocent until proven guilty, and that there has to be guilt beyond a reasonable doubt for the jury to actually convict any defendant, Donald Trump or otherwise, of a crime. That was detailed in the 55 pages of jury instructions that Judge Merchan read out today. What did you make of the actual instructions themselves? It took almost an hour and a half for him to get through them, speaking to the idea that there are some complicated elements to the things that they are considering in that room.
For sure. And jury instructions in any case are always going to be incredibly important. And there's a lot of what the jury was instructed on today that is par for the course in any criminal case. So the judge is going to be talking to them about exactly what you just said, what reasonable doubt means, how much certainty. Obviously, we really don't know anything in life with a complete 100% sense of certainty. So what is beyond a reasonable doubt? The judge also will give a very standard instruction about, certain types of evidence, what certain aspects of the laws at issue of this case mean. And then there were the instructions that were more specific to this case about the credibility and corroborating evidence of witnesses and then documentary corroborative evidence that was heard in the court. So it's important that these instructions were very detailed, and they were. And, one thing that's unique about New York is that apparently the jurors do not get to take those instructions back with them to the jury room. So I think that might mean that we might get some more questions than usual from the jury as they're going about weighing this evidence against the law and following the instructions that they're given.
I want to ask you something. I want to be careful with this, Elizabeth, as we talk about the jury. There was reporting today in a couple of places, the Bulwark first to report a skeptical juror who may be Trump-friendly, has appeared to nod along in accordance with the defense, lit up when J.D. Vance walked in the room, smiled when Michael Cohen was in the throes of cross-examination. The New York Times has gone so far as to identify the number of that juror today. Is this dangerous? And what does it mean potentially for a deadlocked jury?
Well, I think that, we certainly need to be careful about not attacking the jury. And, Judge Merchan has been very adamant throughout this process, and in the contempt order that was issued against Donald Trump for violating the gag order about attacking witnesses and the jury. So it's incredibly important that jurors be allowed to do their job without fear of intimidation. Certainly, look, the jury was selected by both the prosecution and defense. So one would assume that the defense got some jurors in the panel that they thought would be favorable to them. That's, part of this adversarial process that we have when we have a jury trial. So, the defense tries to pick jurors that they think will vote in favor of their client, and the prosecution looks for jurors who will weigh the evidence fairly, which they think will lead to a conviction. And so, I think that if you the reporting about some of the jurors, there was someone who followed Trump on Truth Social. Probably a lot of people don't have Truth Social unless they are in some ways favorable to Donald Trump, but I suppose there are always outliers. But I think one thing that's important to remember is that the jury is a collaborative, deliberative body. And that's one of the things that makes it so unique. You need to have unanimity. And so part of that is the jurors coming together, reasoning things out together, working together to try to come to a result. There are instances of hung juries. That's where one juror is, or perhaps more than one, is a holdout. But often we do see unanimous verdicts because there is that kind of pressure to come to a group decision.
If, though, there is still that one holdout, Elizabeth, if we can just game this forward, knowing we have no idea what the outcome here is going to be, and there is a hung jury and therefore a mistrial, what recourse does the prosecution have? Does everything just end there? Could they get another attempt, another swing at this before the presidential election, knowing how hard it was to get this case to go to trial the first time around, let alone the many others that don't look like they will within the next 6 months?
Yeah, basically, I think that this would be the end of the road then if there is a hung jury. It's an issue that I think the judge will be trying to get jurors to come to a unanimous decision, whether that's acquittal or conviction. You always want a jury to come to a decision, and that's really what the process is aimed at doing, whether it's through the jury on their own or through the judge working with the jury to see if they can come to an agreement. And again, that's not pressure to come to a conviction. It's a pressure to come to a unanimous agreement because you want the jury to really render a verdict, whether it's a verdict of acquittal or a conviction.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're in the wait here at this point, Elizabeth, and we're trying not to speculate. I just wonder, though, the longer this takes, who you see it helping. Does a lengthy deliberation actually help the prosecution in this case?
I think this is so the common wisdom has always been that a quick verdict is usually a guilty verdict, and the longer it goes on, the more likely it's going to be either a hung jury or an acquittal. That has certainly, especially in high-profile cases, that conventional wisdom has gone out the window. The O.J. Simpson verdict, for example, was quick and obviously an acquittal. Here, I think that, again, that conventional wisdom might not necessarily hold because, look, the case itself, no matter who the defendant is one that has a lot of moving parts. So the jury is going to want to take their time and be very deliberative about it. But also, these are human beings who know that they are dealing with a historic, truly momentous and unprecedented situation here with the former president of the United States facing criminal conviction. And that is a serious matter. So I think they're going to take their jobs very seriously. So I think that if they take their time to make sure they get it right, that in this case perhaps is not as indicative of whether it's going to be an acquittal or a conviction as it might be in the run-of-the-mill case. But I do think, if we're looking at going into next week, then we're going to be looking very closely at what questions are coming out of the jury room to try to get a sense of where the jury is. Those questions, I think, will be very interesting to watch and will be read as tea leaves of